Welcome back to a very stormy lockdown library. We have, as you can see, quite a lot of rainy weather going on over the River Fowl behind me, blustery trees and very, very grey little windswept Cornish village in the background. I hope by the time this goes on to our YouTube and you're watching it with me in a couple of days, post me filming it now, it's back to being really sunny and lovely for you. But for now, here we are, snuggled in, and I have drinking with me in my hand here, and I hope you have in yours, this week's cocktail, which is the Lady Rebel. I just Googled it, and the recipe comes out really quick. It's lovely. It's a bit of, I'm going for soya cream and apricot flavours and brandy and bourbon, so I haven't held back, except I have rebelled against the grenadine. I put a lot less grenadine in than they say, because the only nice grenadine is homemade, and this one isn't, so yarbu sex to you, grenadine. Right, so we're talking about Lady Rebels because this week's Salon is, as you know, this season we've been looking at suffrage and the suffrage movement and the creatives of the suffrage movement with the wonderful Dr. Naomi Paxton. And this week, No One Expects the Suffragettes is about the really unusual, creative, kind of almost site-specific stuff they got up to. And that actually one of the things that I love about having researched these with Naomi, or really being told about these things by Naomi, and then sharing them with you, is that every single week it just feels like it's just as relevant then as now, and there's things that we're still seeing them doing 100 years ago that we're using in campaigns to this day. The kind of things that we're going to look at this week would absolutely not be out of place in the campaigning raison d'etre or of a modus operandi of people like XR. So it's just, you know, very, very pertinent and makes me go, oh, weren't those suffragettes smart? So the kind of things we're going to talk about, I'm going to introduce, bring Naomi back to talk to us a bit about the scenes that she's chosen this week and stuff in a minute. But one of the things that really struck me about it in talking to her and thinking about protest and having been myself both a protester and an actor, is that of course these things make you very highly visible. And that is what you want because you want to get your message across or your performance across or whatever, but that comes with costs, particularly as a woman being judged by, you know, the male gaze and by patriarchy, and especially if you're going against convention. And so you have to have pretty big eggs to do it for a lot, I think a lot of the time. So that made me definitely seize on this song that Naomi had waved under my nose. It's got massive eggs. The eggs on this are fantastic because basically one of the things that we've talked about before with Greenham and that the suffragettes used to do a lot is take an existing song and put their own words to it. And this song, they've boldly and righteously changed the words to Glory, Glory, Hallelujah to make it a suffrage song, making, of course, the suffrage cause almost a holy one, which is even more brave and eggsy when you think about it in the context of a much more religious, Christianly religious society than we are today. It's kind of, I love the fact that it almost has that sort of slight ring of Lennon likening the Beatles' fame to being greater than that of Jesus and things. So it kind of all felt like it was in that area for me, so I was quite chuffed about that. So I shall now sing you the suffrage version of Glory, Glory, Hallelujah. Rise up, women, for the fight is hard and long. Rise up in thousands for the singing in... Oh, fuck. I'm going to give myself another go at that. In tackling my first religious song in a salon, I was immediately smote, let's presume, by God, who can say, and messed up on the very second line. So I'll try it again for you. Rise up, women, for the fight is hard and long. Rise up in thousands, singing loud this battle song. Right is might, and in strength we shall be strong. The cause goes marching on. Glory, glory, hallelujah. Glory, glory, hallelujah. Glory, glory, hallelujah. The cause goes marching on. We stormed the House of Commons with our little band so true. We frightened all the statesmen, still they trembled through and through. They clapped us into prison and we gladly went for you. And the cause goes marching on. Glory, glory, hallelujah. Glory, glory, hallelujah. Glory, glory, hallelujah. And the cause goes marching on. Come, have courage, we shall win our liberty. Day will dawn at last, and the stout of heart are we. Reinforcement make opponents quickly turn and flee, and the cause goes marching on. Glory, glory, hallelujah. Glory, glory, hallelujah. Glory, glory, hallelujah. And the cause goes marching on. We would die for you if that would break the chain. We live to battle over and over again. We will never yield until wrong has been slain, and the cause goes marching on. Glory, glory, hallelujah. Glory, glory, hallelujah. Glory, glory, hallelujah. And the cause goes marching on. Pretty big eggs, huh? I had to work very hard not to sing "Teacher hits us with a ruler" on every verse of that, because that's the only version I've ever sung. Anyway, right, we shall press on, marching boldly forth into our little interview section with Naomi for this week. As usual, we've recorded ourselves remotely in our houses on Zoom, and we've asked some wonderful actors to voice 2 extracts this week that Naomi's chosen for us. So they, again, you'll see them as faces on a Zoom screen put together, but they are recording remotely from their homes while they do it. Very clever of them. So have fun with that. I'll see you in a moment. Chin chin push hearts, all you lady rebels. Hello again.
Hello, how are you?
I'm good, thank you. Yes, coming to you from sunny Cornwall today. Hence bunting rather than lines of books. It's just like the plainer view from the little room I work in when I'm down here. But I'm glad to see you in your gorgeous book-lined, fairy lit little treasure trove of a study. I'm very excited to talk about, let's talk about the title and the picture that we have for today's salon. Tell us about it, Naomi.
Okay, so the title is Nobody Expects the Suffragettes, and the picture, done by the amazing Jackie Fleming, is taken from a press picture of a group of women in New York City in 1915 who did a sort of protest, a performative protest, site-specific protest on the New York subway. And they've dubbed themselves, or were dubbed by the press actually, the lapboard ladies. And so that picture is actually of all those women holding a placard with various pro-suffrage messages on it. And it's just a curious story that I came across in my research when I was researching in Washington. So I'm just going to get this up here. So I was researching the archives of a woman called Folla La Follette, who was a American actress and suffragist. She was married to a suffrage playwright called George Middleton. Her mother was a lawyer, her father was a senator, and all pro-suffrage, the whole family, which was amazing. And I discovered in October 1915 there was a huge vote in New York State for, were New York State going to allow votes for women, and suffrage campaigners really went all out in terms of visibility in the city, making themselves visible. So there were trucks, there were handing out baby clothes, there was a sort of a 24-hour conversation booth in Times Square, loads of different theatre owners let suffragists come and speak in the interval of shows that were going on a particular evening. So just amazing stuff. And one of the protests was the lapboard ladies. So the elevated railways in New York and the subway in New York, all the advertisements on those were run by one particular company, which was called Ward and Gow. And they'd obviously been paid a great deal of money to display anti-suffrage advertisements. For this upcoming vote. And so the suffragists, many whom were very wealthy, sort of offered them lots more money to put up pro-suffrage material, but they refused. So they just wouldn't do it. So people traveling around New York were just seeing these kind of anti-suffrage material. So on this day, a group of women, I'm trying to think how many it was, sorry, I'll come back to you on this. But anyway, a group of women rode the New York subway, holding up pro-suffrage placards and sitting underneath where the anti-suffrage messages were. So to be kind of visible, site-specific message boards for suffrage, and it was really interesting. So there were teachers, there were lots of actresses, there were society women, obviously a lot of the press images are of those, There were men from the local art school who stood outside the subway stations in sandwich boards handing out information, kind of wanting to have conversations about that. And it's really curious. So they invited journalists with them to come and watch them sitting and see how the people on the subway reacted to them. And also really interesting to get some reflections from the women involved, who obviously felt that, you know, this is being visible in public space as a suffragist was a really interesting thing for women, and in fact being visible as an activist is a very interesting place to put yourself in. But to be sat on the subway for hours and hours and hours holding these placards, some of them found it really difficult being watched in that way, or being seen in that way. So yeah, so that's what that first image is about. Nobody expects the suffragettes. And when I first heard of that story and I did some research on it, I was thinking this is really immersive, so well, it's site-specific theatre at a time when we don't really think that site-specific theatre, or the terminology for that, really happened. So many years before that. So yeah, that's what it's about.
That's lovely, especially when you think about how much theatre and visible creativity is being used by campaigners like in XR and things, and to know it goes back to much earlier campaigning techniques is actually really lovely, isn't it?
I loved it. I haven't heard of anything particularly on the tube in London, so it was really interesting to hear about the subway protests. And in fact, a few years ago, I'd given a paper about this and I'd written a bit, and an American actress who was working at one of the transport museums in New York got in touch and asked for the information so that when she was giving tours, she could tell people about it. So that was really cool. So hopefully before the COVID times, there was somebody maybe she's got a job doing something else, but there was somebody who was sharing this story of the lapboard ladies and this sort of pro-suffrage activism on the subway. I just love it as a piece of unexpected visibility.
Yeah, unexpected visibility and joy.
Yeah, absolutely.
So what's the first extract that you're going to share with us? We've got two today, I think, haven't we?
Yes, so thinking on this theme of unexpected activism, or places maybe you wouldn't expect suffrage activists to be. This is a very curious play. Now I'm going to introduce it. The woman who wrote this is called Mary Windsor, and she's American. We're just staying with that American suffrage at the moment. So this is played from 1913. She'd actually spent about 6 months in London during 1913 and 1914, really immersed in the British suffrage movement and getting a feel for it all. But she was very heavily involved in the suffrage movement in Philadelphia, actually. Was it Philadelphia? Am I lying? No, Pennsylvania, excuse me. So her play is called A Suffrage Rummage Sale, with the subtitle An Auction Interrupted. And it happens in two parts. So the first part is a real auction to raise funds for the suffrage cause. And the second part is a staged interruption to the auction by 3 fictional characters. So the intention is that the audience have no idea that they're attending anything other than just an auction and a fundraiser. And then until the stage is stormed by these 3, isn't it really interesting, by these 3 figures. So what happens is she writes in the intro to the play that the cast for the auction interrupted part of it will agree together on an item which is kind of the trigger item that will trigger then the second half of the play. And so 3 characters arrive. So we have Mrs. Grundy. So Mrs. Grundy is a character from literature who typifies kind of the disapproving, judgmental middle class sort of neighbour. What will Mrs. Grundy think? There's Mrs. Partington, who is also a character from literature, who carries a broom, very much in the kind of King Canute in things she's often pictured trying to sweep back the tide of progress. Okay. So she's got this broom. And then we have the Mad Hatter from Alice in Wonderland, who comes on. So, and all 3 of them really just extol the virtues of anti-suffragism and show, as in many suffrage plays, just how ridiculous the arguments are. So in this extract, we're going to hear a little bit from Mrs. Grundy, Mrs. Partington, and the Mad Hatter.
Mrs. Grundy and Mrs. Partington are both present.
We do not wish to appear in public.
The anti-suffragist never leaves her home. She never goes to the theatre or the opera or concerts or lectures or bridge whist parties. No, never. Nor luncheons, nor dinners, nor suppers, nor teas, nor bargain counters. She remains in the home, hermetically sealed there like a fly in amber.
Woman's place is in the home.
Forever in the home.
Then all the hundreds and thousands of women whom we meet in the theatres, the opera, the department stores, the train stations, the streets, and the churches, are they all suffragists?
Every one of them.
How the cause is growing. Do you think that all nations will soon grant their women the franchise?
If woman suffrage were adopted, it would bring about the downfall of civilization. It would take us straight back to the caves of our primeval ancestors.
Well, I would have you know my ancestors were far too aristocratic to live in caves. That's why I don't want the ballot. Women of wealth and social position can get along very comfortably without it. I don't want it myself, and I don't intend other women to have it.
No good housekeeper wants it. I would rather scrub the floors forever than undertake the heavy and burdensome task of voting once a year.
Let them go on toiling and moiling, scrubbing and sweeping in the good old-fashioned way.
As their great-grandmothers did before them.
We want no change.
We need no vote.
We have all the rights we want.
At the end of that, the arguments get more and more ridiculous. The argument is made, women, the physical force argument, women cannot fight, and it ends up the Mad Hatter's pinned to the ground by Mrs. Partington with her broom, and they're being beaten up and they're chased off stage, and it all gets very ridiculous. And then the auctioneer, ends the speech with a kind of saying that the last thing that he has to offer today is the most precious of all, the ballot, and you have to bid for it, but with your whole heart and soul and devotion. So it kind of turns around, but it's really interesting. It's a kind of stealth suffrage play that completely takes the audience by surprise, and just again in a completely non-theatrical space with three really interesting characters. And yeah, you've got your audience there under false pretenses. So it's definitely a curiosity, that one.
Yeah.
I've actually found a report from a journalist about being in the subway with the lapboard ladies. Can I tell you? I'll read you a bit of what she said.
Oh, yeah, I do.
So first of all, one of the women said, who was involved, said, "It was the hardest thing I ever did for women's suffrage. Carrying a placard on a subway may seem a simple thing, but it isn't. It isn't easy to do anything that sets you apart from other persons," which is interesting. And then so Blanche Brace, the journalist, has reported, she attached herself to Father La Follette, and she says, "I wanted to see how this daughter of a line of politicians would take her part in the lapboard campaign." So we get lots of descriptions here. So down near Fulton Street, which is the subway station, Father La Follette and I sat on opposite sides of a very fat man who had to bend forward and peer clear around his stomach whenever he read one of the constantly turned placards. Another man remarked belligerently that he thought women's laps were made for holding babies, not lapboards. And it was explained to him that not only the laps, but the lapboards were for the babies, and he had the grace to look thoughtful. And then she says, "We spent the entire afternoon in the subway, occasionally coming to the surface to breathe like the seals," as Father La Follette said, but for the most part just changing directions at stations where it didn't cost anything going the other way. Never was so much advertising, suffrage advertising, done for 5 cents and an incalculable amount of grit on the part of the lapboard bearer. "It was hard, but from the amount of attention it attracted, it was worth it," said Father La Follette when I left her. Balanced against the thousands of people who'd read the lapboard, the few who had seemed indifferent and the dozens who had expressed their interest was the rudeness of just one man. We saw him on an uptown subway, an unwholesome-looking person with a face like a cream puff. "Growing up has its disadvantages. I should have stuck out my tongue at that young man 15 or 20 years ago. Today I couldn't have done that with any satisfaction, for I felt that it would savour too strongly of anti-suffragist lack of logic."
Those were great. I'm glad we came back for those. Thank you. That's really lovely.
It's a pleasure. I mean, I'm sad to say that they lost the vote, but they really did make a huge effort, and they were at this stage, I mean, it changed later, but at this stage in New York in 1915, they were certainly able to be much more present on the streets as an organised force than they could have been, say, in London, like a year earlier, just because there hadn't been that antagonism. There would be, but there hadn't been that antagonism between suffrage campaigners and the police. So, and the kind of commercialisation of the American suffrage movement and the commodification of it was really interesting. So I've always found that a curious story. Yeah,
I have actually found myself occasionally stumped for words and just sticking my tongue out at somebody, a man who's annoyed me. So sadly I have not gained from their more logical protests.
that sounds very reasonable.
What's your last extract for us?
So the last extract is from a play called At the Gates by Alice Shapin. This is in London. This was originally supposed to be performed at the Royal Albert Hall actually in 1909, but the meeting ran over and it couldn't be performed. But it's an interesting piece. Again, it's sort of site specific. It's set right outside the gates of Westminster, the Houses of Parliament, where we find ourselves with a suffragette who is holding up placards and trying to get people to sign her petition, 2 police officers, and a male sympathiser. It's actually quite rare because you never really see pro-suffrage men in suffrage plays, or very rarely see them. And then she encounters various people. So she encounters a politician, she encounters a seamstress, and she encounters a drunken man. And that's the extract we're going to see now.
Roast food, is it? I think not. Oh, I think not.
I've heard something like that before.
What I want to know is, why do you grind us down? That's what I want to know. Why do you grind us down? You take the bread out of our mouths. You leave us the butter. Look at me. Can I get work? No. Why? You have taken it out of my very hands. Yes, you have. I know what I'm talking about. I'm a clever man now, I am. Oh, you don't think so? Oh, indeed. Well, then let me tell you one thing, and then perhaps you will alter your opinion. I know what keeps you going. Everybody knows. You're paid. You're paid to stand here. Look at your clothes. Look at your hat. 1 guinea a night is what you get. 1 guinea a night. And here I am with empty pockets. Look at them. Nice things to feed babies on, aren't they? Empty. Well, yours are filled with Tory gold. I'm a man too. You're not a man.
Thank good for that.
What are you muttering about? Well, don't be afraid to speak out. Can you walk over Westminster Bridge at 5 in the morning?
I dare say I could if I put my whole mind to it.
Oh, can you? I'll wait for your answer. You can't. What can you do? Can you sweep a floor or dust a ceiling? What you should do is go home and wash shirts.
Thanks. I'd rather not.
Oh, too proud. That's it. Too proud. What right have you to be proud when a man stands idle before you? A man, I say. All you want is to grind us down. And let me tell you this. My old missus can wash shirts.
Then I wish you would wash yours. Do go away.
I know my place. I am talking to you as a gentleman should. Perhaps you listen if you got more money for doing it. You can't fool me. That's an expensive fur you're wearing. And look at your hat. You couldn't buy that for a guinea.
Come now, that'll do. Move on.
Oh, move on, is it? Oh, very well. He's moving me on. Moving me on because I was talking to her. I'll tell you a secret. I am a gentleman. I am. And I am a vote. She can't vote. And while I have my way, she shan't.
Nice specimen, that, of the free and independent voter.
Yes. I wonder which party he belongs to.
So the one that gives him the most beer.
I want to ask you one question, my lady, before you grind us down.
I thought I told you to move on.
Oh, no offence, Governor. Perhaps you did. Perhaps you did not.
Yeah, perhaps I did, and the sooner you go, the better it would be for you.
I suppose that to question this young woman about her hat is not a case for the police.
I intend to make it one.
Oh, you do. You do. Has there any of that gold fallen out of her pocket into
What's
your...
that you're saying?
I thought the young lady dropped something. That's all.
That's all, is it? Now you move on.
Don't forget, you are addressing a voter. My old woman's a lot better looking than you are.
That's lovely. Thank you so much, Naomi. I really remember doing a little extract from that in the first time that we met, when we did some work at the Orange Tree Theatre together. That was the first time I met you and was involved in the Suffrage Theatre. So a happy memory for me.
A very happy memory. That was in 2008, I think.
Really?
It's terrifying.
Well, you look just the same, darling, as or do I.
As you do. Yeah, no, it's interesting. And it never stops being curious, a little slice of life.
Yeah.
I suppose the thing I would just say coming off the back of that is plays like this, or plays that depict suffrage campaigners on the streets, we often find in suffrage newspapers around newspaper selling. And they're kind of sort of apparently verbatim encounters, although they're often overwhelmingly positive, so you can tell they're sort of meant to G up the readers of suffrage newspapers. And I do think suffrage newspapers are the most amazing resource. 3 of them are available free online, and you can just read them and just get a slice of what's happening. And I did make a little film, I think in 2015, for BBC Arts about suffrage newspapers. So I'll put a link to that here, if anyone's interested in finding a bit more about that. But yeah, these stories of women's visibility on the streets, particularly for theatre people who found it quite difficult really to be visible in that way, but also I think suffrage newspaper sellers and these encounters that we see, these sort of verbatim style encounters or these impromptu encounters, really show, for me, what they stand out for is that the suffrage campaigners, particularly in the theatre, are not hiding behind theatre spaces, that hiding behind suffrage plays. They're really pushing themselves out there to have real life conversations and to really represent the cause as humans. And that is scary, but that is also how you learn to argue, how you learn to articulate your views, and how you learn to how you kind of learn to be part of a wider activist movement and realize not only your opportunities but also your limitations. So these are a really great way, I think, a little insight into the suffrage movement. So yeah, if we can link to that would be brilliant.
Yeah, absolutely. Can't wait to watch it. Very exciting. Thank you, you impressive beast.
Oh, I'm back at you. Thank you, and thanks to all the actors who are involved in this as well. It's just really lovely to be able to tell these little nuggets of stories.
Yeah, it's a real privilege to have those actors involved. Thank you very much for bringing that to us.
Thank you.
We'll see you again next week, and the week after that we're doing a live show together. So
we are. Get your tickets if you haven't got them already.
What she said.
Bye, thank you.
Here's to all of those fantastic actors and those pieces. Thank you so much, Naomi. I am going to big up now another really fantastic woman that I've worked with in the past called Kat Youngnickel, Dr. Kat Youngnickel. So she wrote a book that I want to recommend to you as our last section of this Salon this week, the Culture Club section, and it's called Bikes and Bloomers. Now, I'm very sad not to have this book here. It is, of course, in London in our other lockdown library, whilst I am here in a very rainy, wind-tossed secret garden version of the lockdown library. So I can't show it you, which is even more upsetting for me because it's the only book I've ever been asked to endorse. So there's a little quote from me on the cover, or there used to be. It may have gone to more prints now and got more famous people in it, but I was very excited to be asked and love the book. So it's a really fascinating study. Look up Kat, because she did a whole series of work around the politics of patents. So thinking about that thing again about the visibility of protest, and even how sometimes doing something outside of the conventions of your day becomes in itself a form of protest, whether you want that or not. This book suddenly sprung into my mind. Basically, what Kat discovered was that when women were first riding the bicycle, which of course overlaps a lot with the suffrage movement, they were getting a new source of freedom, and this was obviously seen as very challenging by the established conventions of their day. So they got a lot of stick for being women cyclists. And there are two things they encountered. The first thing was they would quite often try and change what they wore because it was not safe to cycle in. So you have people like Rosa Bloom inventing the bloomers, and making sure that you're not getting all of your skirts and things tangled up in your wheels. That's unsafe for you. And it's also adding fuel to the fire of the idea that women physically were unsuitable for riding a bike. The arguments for women in the day who wanted to ride bikes being, it's not us that's physically not suitable, it's what we're asked to wear. So then what people like Rosa Bloom and many other women who cycled in things like bloomers found was that they were singled out. There's accounts of them having children and people on the streets throwing vegetables and rocks and things at them because they look different and they're seen as a threat and a challenge. And I guess it's just good old-fashioned sexism as well. So there's some women that eggs that out. They have the eggs and they just carry on, and they're in a position in their life where they're able to, and that's great. And they carry on fighting the good cause for us to eventually wear trousers and leopard skin dungarees and all the rest of it like that. Faux leopard skin, obviously. But there's lots of women who, for various reasons or at various times, can't just put on a pair of bloomers that don't look very revolutionary to us, but that marked them out very much at the time and would have things like ladies' clubs and cafes and things from stopping them from going in if they were in those clothes. So that's where Kat Young-Nicol found these amazing set of patents that women started to make around design of clothes. So they would design clothes that looked like conventional Victorian Edwardian ladies' clothes, but that actually could then be adjusted and become something you could wear on your bicycle. So it might be that you look like you're in a skirt, but then suddenly you can unclip it when you're outside of the cafe, and it's a cape, and you've got your little bloomers underneath, and hop on your bike and off you go. And there are a variety of things like that, or that you tuck under and your skirt becomes trousers that do up at the back, and suddenly you're then in these kind of baggy trousers or bloomers again, but then you can drop it when you get to the cafe or ladies' society, and suddenly you're in a skirt again and you've unbuttoned and ta-da, you're very respectable. So it's a fascinating collection, and she brings it all together in a book called Bikes and Bloomers. I really recommend you have a look at it. It catalogues the entire sort of the entire experiences that women had, sort of championing and fighting for their right to ride their bicycles, and also of course change society while they're at it. It's a fascinating and really fun read, and there are the patterns in there quite often as well, so you can make your own vintage cycling clothes. There you go. So that's my recommendation for this week. Bikes and Bloomers by Dr. Kat Young-Nicol. So I'm going to finish off with a song that I thought we all knew and loved, because obviously I only actually had the idea just yesterday to include Bikes and Bloomers in this, because it seemed so much to be about that visibility and the conflict of being visible and different. And when you choose to assimilate and jump out, and when you choose to assimilate and not jump out, and all those things, and when you choose to wear what you want to wear for whatever it is you want to do. And of course that made me then think about cycling songs, and then the internet gave me this great gift. I'm going to sing, like, obviously the most famous cycling song, which is Daisy Daisy, and I think it's the first thing my parents ever put me on stage to do when I was at play school and all that sort of stuff, and I think I refused to sing it and sat there with my thumb in my mouth shaking my head at my parents as they were going. So no such luck since then, sadly. But then the internet gave me 2 extra verses, and they're completely mad. I had no idea Daisy Daisy had other verses, so I'm going to sing it for you. And if you know where these verses come from, please let me know. Please get in touch on social media or email Scary Little Girls, because I'm fascinated by these. Okay, so I'll start us on where we're all familiar. It goes like this. Daisy, Daisy, give me your answer true. I'm half crazy, all for the love of you. It won't be a stylish marriage, I can't afford a carriage, but you'll look sweet upon the seat of a bicycle made for 2. And now here, according to the internet, is the answer, which I really relate to, because I too cannot ride a bike. Michael, this is my answer, dear. I can't cycle, it makes me feel so queer. If you can't afford a carriage, bang goes this foolish marriage, 'cause I'll be blowed if I'll be towed on a bicycle made for two. And then here's the third verse, which gets, if anything, possibly a little weirder. Michael, Michael, the coppers are after you, and if they catch you, they'll give you a month or two. They'll lock you up with wire behind a black Mariah. So ding your bell and pedal like hell, for the coppers are after you. Who knew? See you next time.